On a brisk autumn morning, the world was going about its usual business. In New York City, the streets buzzed with the early rush of commuters, the air crisp and cool as leaves rustled underfoot, signaling the deepening of the season. In the cafes, steaming cups of coffee fogged up the windows, and conversations filled the air, a typical symphony of urban life. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the sun was setting in Tokyo, painting the sky with strokes of pink and orange, while shopkeepers began to close up, eager to end their long day. It was just another day, until it wasn't. At 9:17 a.m. Eastern Time, the sky behaved in a way that no one on Earth had ever witnessed. With no forewarning, the blue expanse above seemed to ripple like a disturbed pond after a stone is thrown into it. People stopped in their tracks, their morning routines interrupted by a phenomenon that defied explanation. The rippling grew more intense, and then, with a sound like fabric tearing, the sky appeared to split. From this tear, a massive, gleaming ship emerged, its size incomprehensible, covering the expanse of the sky as far as the eye could see. Its surface was a mirror-like metal, reflecting the city below and blending seamlessly with the surrounding clouds. This wasn't like any known aircraft, its design was too alien, too precise, and eerily silent. As panic began to spread, traffic came to a standstill. Cars honked incessantly, and people poured out of buildings, their necks craned upwards. Smartphones pointed skywards, capturing images and videos that would soon flood social media networks, though no one could truly capture the scale of what they were seeing. Simultaneously, across every device capable of receiving a signal, from televisions and shop windows to the smartphones in people's hands, screens flickered and went blank for a heartbeat. Then, they lit up, showing a face, or what should have been a face. It was humanoid but unsettlingly different. The skin was translucent, revealing a hint of the bioluminescent veins beneath. The eyes were the most striking feature, large and luminescent, swirling with starlight galaxies. The being spoke, and its voice was a calm, melodic tone that resonated deeply, not just in the ears of those who heard it but felt in their very chests. "People of Earth, I am Ziril, a representative of the Seraphs," the being began, speaking every language simultaneously, a linguistic feat that added layers to the already thickening plot. "We come from beyond your known universe, from a place of great advancement and peace. Today, we extend an offer to your species." The murmurs among the crowds grew into a cacophony of shock and wonder as Ziril continued. "Our technology can end all wars on your planet, heal your sick, and prevent your suffering. We can guarantee you a future without pain and struggle. But every offer has its price." The screens around the world zoomed out, showing more beings like Ziril standing in a line, each with the same serene demeanor and unsettling beauty. "In exchange for our benevolence, we ask for your service. Not as servants but as partners in maintaining the order and peace we will help you achieve." The message concluded with a simple, yet profound statement. "You have 24 hours to deliberate among your leaders and present us with your decision. Choose wisely, for this offer is extended only once." As the screens returned to their normal broadcasts, the people of Earth were left in stunned silence. The ship remained visible in the sky, a constant reminder of the choice that lay ahead. In coffee shops, offices, and living rooms around the world, the usual noise of daily life was muted, replaced by an urgent, whispered question: what should we do? This unprecedented day marked the beginning of what would be the most significant global discussion in human history. The day the sky split open was not just an interruption of a morning, it was the dawn of a new era, for better or worse. In the immediate aftermath of the Seraph's arrival, global networks were inundated with reactions. Every news station, blog, and social media platform exploded with theories, fears, and speculations. Meanwhile, international leaders scrambled to respond, organizing an unprecedented emergency meeting at the United Nations, hastily summoning experts in every conceivable field, from astrophysics to theology, to make sense of the visitors' intentions. The world watched as every leader, diplomat, and representative made their way to the UN headquarters in New York, not far from where the alien ship hovered silently, an omnipresent sentinel in the sky. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of dread and wonder. the usually stately proceedings gave way to urgent whispers and hurried consultations. As the assembly called to order, the Secretary-General addressed the gathered dignitaries, his voice steady but underscored with the gravity of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with a decision of monumental importance. The beings known as the Seraphs have offered us what they call eternal peace, a tempting promise in a world fraught with conflict. However, their request for service in return remains profoundly ambiguous. Discussion broke out among the assembly, with some leaders voicing cautious optimism about the potential for an end to war and human suffering. Others expressed skepticism and distrust, questioning the motives of any species that would demand subservience as a condition for peace. Dr. Lena Miles, invited for her expertise in ethics and her influential voice in the public debate, took the podium. We must consider not only what is offered but at what cost. True peace cannot be imposed through domination or dependency. It must be chosen freely and maintained by the collective will of all people. Her words resonated, sparking intense discussions that spilled out of the formal meetings and into the corridors and private chambers where smaller groups debated the implications of the Seraph's terms. Meanwhile, outside the UN, the public's reaction was a growing storm. Protests erupted on the streets, with thousands gathering, holding signs that read "No peace through slavery" and "Freedom over false promises." The protesters came from all walks of life, activists, workers, students, all united in their suspicion and fear of the Seraph's true intentions. As night fell, the ship continued to cast its shadow over the city, its presence a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Inside the assembly hall, the debates raged on. A young diplomat from a war-torn nation argued passionately, "For some of us, peace is a distant dream. If the Seraphs can truly end wars, should we not consider their offer? What is the price of peace if not the highest priority for those who suffer daily?" His words struck a chord, and the room fell silent, pondering the weight of decades, even centuries, of conflict that could potentially be resolved overnight. In a secure room, military leaders from various nations convened a video conference with top scientists to discuss the technological implications. "We've observed no overt acts of hostility, but their technology is clearly beyond ours," stated a leading astrophysicist. "Their ability to appear suddenly in our atmosphere and manipulate digital networks suggests capabilities that could easily overpower us if they chose to." The military strategists nodded, their faces grim. "If we reject their offer, can we defend ourselves? And if we accept, how do we ensure they uphold their end of the bargain?" one general asked. These strategic discussions were mirrored in academic circles and online forums across the globe, as humanity grappled with the enormous implications of the decision. The dialogue was fractious and multifaceted, reflecting the vast array of human experience and the diverse priorities of different cultures and nations. As the 24-hour deadline approached, the tension reached a crescendo. The world awaited a decision from the UN Assembly, but the outcome remained uncertain. Dr. Miles addressed the assembly once more, her voice a clarion call to reason. "We stand at a crossroads between two futures, one of potential peace shadowed by dependency, and another marked by the continuation of our struggles, but with our autonomy intact. Let us choose not out of fear, but with hope for what we can achieve together as a free people." Her words concluded the session, leaving the leaders to cast their votes in what would be the most significant decision in human history. The world held its breath, waiting to see which path humanity would choose. As the representatives of Earth's nations convened in tense deliberation within the confines of the United Nations, the streets outside mirrored the turmoil in the assembly. News outlets had set up round-the-clock coverage, reporters with microphones extended towards the gathering crowd, capturing the raw emotions of people from every corner of the globe. In a small studio, tucked away on the second floor of a bustling New York street, a group of influential podcasters gathered, broadcasting live to millions of listeners worldwide. The room was cluttered with equipment, coffee cups, and takeout boxes, signs of a long vigil. "We're here live, waiting for any word from the UN," the host, a sharp-witted political commentator named Emily Chen, announced. "Tonight isn't just about what our leaders decide, it's about how we, the people, react and how we move forward." Back at the UN, a sense of urgency permeated the air as the assembly progressed into the early hours. The discussions had been exhaustive and exhausting, with each country presenting its views, concerns, and potential resolutions. Dr. Lena Miles remained a key figure, moving between groups, her arguments both passionate and logical, advocating for autonomy but also acknowledging the desperate desire for peace felt around the world. Meanwhile, in cities across the planet, spontaneous vigils lit up the night. In Paris, thousands gathered around the Eiffel Tower, holding candles and signs, their faces illuminated by the soft glow. In Tokyo, crowds formed human chains in public parks, their silence a powerful testament to the gravity of the situation. In Cairo, spirited debates filled Tahrir Square, echoing the revolutionary spirit that had decades earlier transformed the nation. These gatherings were not just acts of public expression but a critical barometer for the world's leaders, visible from the screens within the UN, showing the weight of the decision that lay on their shoulders. Amidst this global backdrop, digital platforms buzzed with activity. Hashtags like #ChooseFreedom and #PeaceAtAnyCost trended worldwide. Virtual forums saw a surge in participation as people from different cultures and backgrounds exchanged views. The digital age had made this global conversation possible, and now it was adding layers to the diplomatic discussions, showcasing a real-time feed of public opinion. The debates inside the assembly were reaching a climax as dawn approached. A young delegate from Brazil took the floor, her voice clear and compelling. "We must remember," she urged, "that peace imposed is no peace at all. It is mere silence. If we surrender our ability to choose, to disagree, to strive, we surrender what makes us fundamentally human." Her words echoed through the hall, followed by a murmur of agreement from many, but also skeptical glances from others who viewed the Seraph's offer as the only viable solution to their immediate crises. Outside, Emily Chen relayed breaking news, her face serious as the camera zoomed in. Sources inside the assembly report a proposal is forming, a call for a global referendum, giving every citizen of Earth a vote. It seems our leaders are hesitant to make this monumental decision without the explicit consent of the people. This development sparked a new wave of debates both inside and outside the UN. The concept of a global referendum was unprecedented, but it resonated with the democratic ideals held by many nations. It also provided a practical solution to the deadlock that had gripped the assembly. As the sun rose over New York City, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers, the assembly reached a consensus. The Secretary General took the podium, his voice grave yet hopeful. "In recognition of the profound impact this decision will have on every human being, we have resolved to hold a global referendum. Let the people of Earth decide their own fate." The announcement was met with a mixture of relief and new anxiety. Across the world, preparations began for the vote. Governments set to work organizing the logistics of an unprecedented global election, while civic groups mobilized to educate and register voters. In her studio, Emily Chen signed off, her final words a reflection of the momentous times. "Today, we've seen our leaders acknowledge that this decision is too great for them alone. Now, it's up to us, all of us, to choose our path forward. Stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, vote." As the broadcast ended, the screen split, showing scenes from around the world, faces filled with hope, fear, determination, and the shared realization that soon, each person would have the power to influence the future of humanity. As the world prepared for the unprecedented global referendum, a select group of Earth's most esteemed leaders, scientists, and ethicists, including Dr. Lena Miles, were invited to participate in a series of detailed negotiations with the Seraphs aboard their ship. This was a chance to clarify the terms of the offer and to probe the true intentions and capabilities of these extraterrestrial visitors. The delegation was transported to the Seraph's ship via a silent, smooth-moving shuttle that defied any known human technology. As they ascended, the sprawling cityscape of New York diminished beneath them, replaced by the vast, imposing structure of the alien craft. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly glow, reflecting the rising sun in a dazzling display of colors. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Cyril, who led them through corridors that seemed to pulse with a gentle, internal light. The walls were smooth and continuous, with no visible joins or edges, creating a sense of walking inside a living organism rather than a machine. "Welcome to our home away from home," Zero began, his voice as calm and melodious as it had been during his initial address to Earth. "We hope these discussions will foster understanding and trust between our peoples." The first session was held in a large, circular room with a transparent dome that offered a panoramic view of Earth hanging in the vastness of space. The setting was a stark reminder of the smallness of their home planet and the cosmic scale, intensifying the gravity of their discussions. Dr. Miles took the lead in the early talks, pressing Zero for specifics on what service would entail under their terms. "You ask for our service, yet this term is deeply ambiguous. Are we to be autonomous, or are we surrendering our will to yours?" Zero responded with a patient nod. "We seek partners, not servants. Your roles would be akin to stewards of your planet, guided by our knowledge and resources. We would oversee and intervene only to prevent catastrophic conflicts or ecological failures." The negotiations delved into the specifics of these interventions. The Seraphs explained their technology could neutralize weapons systems without causing harm to operators, cure diseases by altering their genetic foundations, and even manipulate weather patterns to prevent natural disasters. Each revelation brought a mix of awe and concern from the human delegates. The potential for such power to be abused was not lost on them, prompting heated debates about safeguards and checks on Seraph power. Dr. Miles argued for strict protocols and transparent oversight, principles that were fiercely debated among the delegates. "We must consider not only what we stand to gain but also what we might lose," Dr. Miles stated during one session. "Freedom once surrendered may be difficult to reclaim." As the talks continued, the Seraphs were forthcoming with demonstrations of their technology. They showed the delegation a device that could instantly detoxify polluted water and another that could generate food from basic organic compounds, solutions to some of Earth's most pressing challenges. These displays were meant to reassure, but for many, they also underscored the potential dependency Earth would have on Seraph technology. The discussions extended late into the night, with each side striving to understand the other's perspective and concerns. Back on Earth, the upcoming referendum spurred public forums, educational broadcasts, and spirited discussions in every home, workplace, and public square. The media covered every aspect of the negotiations, broadcasting edited highlights that reached billions of viewers worldwide. The gravity of the decision was palpable, resonating in the collective consciousness of humanity. In these global conversations, various factions formed. Some saw the Seraphs as saviors, eager to accept their offer to end all wars and suffering. Others feared the loss of human autonomy and the potential for a new form of imperialism, dressed in the guise of benevolence. As the negotiations aboard the Seraph ship concluded, the delegates returned to Earth, each carrying the weight of their new knowledge. Dr. Miles addressed a press conference shortly after their return, summarizing the talks. "We have seen wonders that could transform our world, but we must decide if the price is one we are willing to pay." The stage was set for the referendum. Across the globe, humanity pondered the Seraph's offer, wrestling with the choice between a potentially utopian future and the preservation of their independence and self-determination. The world waited, breath held, for the day when each person would cast their vote to decide the fate of their planet. As the day of the global referendum approached, a palpable tension settled over the planet. From bustling megacities to remote villages, the weight of the decision on humanity's collective shoulders was felt everywhere. The question on the ballot was simple yet profound: do you accept the Seraph's offer for eternal peace in exchange for humanity's service? Yet, the implications of that question were anything but simple. The weeks leading up to the vote were filled with public debates, expert panels, and endless media coverage. Dr. Lena Miles, having returned from the negotiations more conflicted than ever, embarked on a speaking tour, aiming to educate the public about the nuances of the Seraph's offer. She shared insights about their advanced technology and their promise of peace, but also the potential risks of dependency and loss of autonomy. In New York City, a massive rally gathered in Central Park. Speakers from diverse backgrounds took the stage, advocating for and against the proposal. We stand at the precipice of a new era, one speaker declared, his voice echoing through the assembled crowd. We can end all war, all suffering, all hunger. But at what cost? Are we ready to entrust our fate to beings we barely understand? Meanwhile, in a small village in India, the local community gathered around a single radio, listening intently to a broadcast of Dr. Miles explaining the terms of the agreement. The villagers debated among themselves in hushed tones. For them, the promise of an end to poverty and illness was almost too good to resist, yet the fear of losing their cultural identity and independence was equally compelling. As the debates raged on, governments around the world took measures to ensure that every eligible person could cast their vote. Special provisions were made for remote and inaccessible areas, with mobile voting stations set up and community leaders mobilized to help explain the stakes of the referendum to everyone. On the eve of the vote, a special broadcast was aired globally, with Cyril addressing humanity one more time. We have watched your world struggle with conflict and scarcity for centuries, he said, his tone both compassionate and compelling. We offer you a path to harmony, but it is your choice to walk it. Choose with your hearts and your minds. The day of the referendum dawned clear and bright. From the smallest islands in the Pacific to the sprawling cities of Europe and America, people turned out in unprecedented numbers to vote. The scenes were remarkable: long lines of voters in Tokyo, spirited discussions in cafes in Paris, and solemn crowds in Cairo, all participating in a decision that was as much philosophical as it was political. As the polls closed, the world waited in anxious anticipation. News organizations prepared to broadcast the results, and people gathered in public spaces, homes, and online forums to watch the outcome unfold. The atmosphere was electric, with everyone aware that they were part of a historic moment. Finally, the results began to come in, displayed on giant screens in Times Square, Piccadilly Circus, and other landmarks around the world. The vote was close, incredibly close. Nations that had suffered through recent wars and conflicts tended to vote in favor of the Serif's offer, desperate for the promise of peace. Others, with a strong tradition of independence and skepticism of external authority, were more inclined to vote against. As the last votes were counted, it became clear Earth had narrowly accepted the Serif's proposition. The final tally showed a slight majority in favor, with a global average of 51% for and 49% against. The decision was made, but it was clear that nearly half of humanity was deeply uncomfortable with the outcome. Dr. Miles watched the results come in from her home, a mix of relief and apprehension in her eyes. "We've chosen a new path," she said in an interview shortly after the announcement. "Now, more than ever, we must remain vigilant, ensuring that this partnership respects our values and our humanity." As celebrations and protests erupted in various parts of the world, the Serifs prepared to initiate their plan for Earth. The next chapter of human history was about to begin, fraught with hope and uncertainty, and the eyes of the universe were watching. The world awoke to a new reality the day after the referendum. The narrow victory revealed a planet divided yet bound by a common destiny. As the news of humanity's collective decision settled in, the Serifs wasted no time in initiating their plan for Earth. Their first act was a global broadcast, aiming to reassure those who had voted against their proposal and to outline the immediate steps they would take to ensure the promised peace. Cyril appeared on screens worldwide, his visage now familiar to all. "We understand the concerns and the fears that have been expressed," he said soothingly. "Our first priority is to demonstrate the benefits of our partnership. You will soon witness the cessation of all armed conflicts, the distribution of food to the hungry, and the introduction of our medical technologies to your health services." True to their word, the Serifs began their interventions with astonishing efficiency. Across the globe, their ships, sleek and silent, descended into conflict zones. Without a single shot being fired, their advanced technology disabled weapons from Africa's strife-torn savannas to the battle-scarred streets of Middle Eastern cities. Leaders of warring factions were brought together under Serif mediation, and ceasefires were established with an effectiveness that no human effort had ever achieved. In famine-affected regions, the Serifs deployed food synthesis units, capable of producing high-nutrition meals using minimal resources. These units were installed in public places, accessible to all, and soon, the once common images of malnutrition began to fade from the world's consciousness. Perhaps the most dramatic changes were seen in healthcare. The Seraphs introduced devices that could diagnose and cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Hospitals and clinics were equipped with modules that could regenerate tissue, cure malignancies, and vaccinate against future infections, all within moments of treatment. However, these miraculous advancements came with subtle strings attached. The Seraphs required that all interventions be monitored and managed through their systems, which necessitated the integration of their technology with Earth's infrastructures. This integration was overseen by appointed human liaisons, chosen for their expertise and willingness to collaborate closely with the Seraphs. Dr. Lena Miles, who had become a leading voice of cautious advocacy, was appointed to head the Ethics Oversight Committee, tasked with ensuring that all Seraph actions adhered to agreed-upon human rights standards. Her role was crucial, acting as a mediator between human governments and the Seraphs, ensuring transparency and accountability in all dealings. As these changes unfolded, they were not without resistance. Protests continued in many cities, with demonstrators voicing concerns over the loss of human sovereignty and the potential for Seraph overreach. Social media platforms were ablaze with debates and discussions about the implications of living under the watchful eyes of alien benefactors. The economic impact was profound as well. Industries tied to military production faced massive shifts or shutdowns, leading to job losses in some sectors while creating new opportunities in others, particularly in technology and infrastructure development, now geared towards integrating Seraph technology with human engineering. Culturally, the presence of the Seraphs challenged many traditional beliefs and norms. Religious communities in particular grappled with the existential implications of the Seraphs' existence, leading to a resurgence in theological debates and a re-evaluation of spiritual doctrines in light of the new cosmic perspective. Amidst these sweeping changes, a subculture of independence began to strengthen. Underground networks formed, composed of individuals and groups who opposed too much reliance on Seraph technology. They advocated for maintaining traditional human ingenuity and cautioning against becoming too dependent on alien intervention. Dr. Miles found herself sympathizing with these groups, even as she worked with the Seraphs. In her heart, she questioned whether humanity had conceded too much control. Her fears were not allayed by the smooth assurances of Cyril, who continued to preach patience and understanding through the transition. As Earth adapted to this new era of peace and prosperity under the guidance of the Seraphs, the lingering question remained: at what point does partnership become dependence, and when does dependence risk turning into subservience? Dr. Miles knew these were questions that she and the rest of humanity would soon have to face. Several months had passed since the Seraphs began their interventions on Earth. The world had transformed in ways previously unimaginable. The cessation of wars had led to an unprecedented global calm. Economic disparities were narrowing with the new technologies that ensured food and healthcare for all. Yet, beneath the surface of this newfound harmony, there were undercurrents of discontent and unease. Dr. Lena Miles walked through the streets of her hometown, observing the changes with a critical eye. She noticed the new structures being erected, towering complexes that housed Seraph technology and personnel. These buildings, with their sleek, alien architecture, stood in stark contrast to the surrounding traditional cityscape, serving as constant reminders of the Seraph's presence. Each day, Lena received reports from her team about the smooth operation of the Seraph facilities and the ongoing distribution of aid. On paper, everything was perfect, perhaps too perfect. As head of the Ethics Oversight Committee, Lena was privy to the intricacies of Seraph operations, which gave her a unique perspective on just how deep their influence ran. In her office, cluttered with piles of reports and digital displays blinking with real-time global data, Lena convened a video meeting with regional leaders. The screen lit up with the faces of men and women who were stationed around the world, each responsible for overseeing the integration of Seraph technology in their territories. Let's start with the updates. How are we doing on the ground? Lena asked, her tone professional yet weary. A woman from Nigeria spoke first. The health modules have been a godsend in rural areas. We've eradicated local outbreaks of cholera and malaria almost overnight. However, there's growing concern about dependency. Our local healthcare workers feel overshadowed, even obsolete. A man from Japan added, "Here in Tokyo, the peace is palpable. Yet, there's a sense of vigilance, almost as if people are waiting for the other shoe to drop. The youth especially are restless, missing the dynamism that conflict sometimes spurred." Lena listened intently, her fears validated by their reports. "Thank you all. It's crucial that we balance these advancements with our autonomy. We can't allow ourselves to become so dependent that we can't function without them." Later that evening, Lena attended a community forum in a bustling city hall, filled with citizens eager to discuss their new way of life. The forum was a vibrant mix of skepticism and gratitude. People expressed their appreciation for the peace and prosperity the Seraphs had brought, but also voiced their concerns about the creeping loss of cultural identity and independence. An elderly man stood up, leaning on his cane, his voice strong despite his age. "They've given us much, but at what cost? Our grandchildren don't know how to resolve even the smallest disputes without consulting the Seraph's guidelines." A young woman countered, "But isn't it worth it? Look around, there's no more hunger, no more war. Isn't that a fair price for some loss of autonomy?" The debate continued, with Lena facilitating, encouraging open dialogue. She knew these forums were essential for gauging public sentiment and fostering a sense of involvement in the ongoing changes. After the forum, Lena walked back to her office, her mind racing with the day's discussions. The city was quieter at night, the streets bathed in the soft glow of lights from the Seraph structures. She passed a mural, newly painted, depicting humans and seraphs holding hands, encircled by olive branches. It was beautiful yet haunting, a visual representation of the ideal of peace that now defined their world. Back in her office, Lena received an encrypted message from a trusted source within the Seraph's administration. The message hinted at upcoming plans to deepen their integration into human society, plans that were not yet public. Lena felt a chill as she read the details. It was becoming clear that the Seraphs had a long-term agenda that extended far beyond their initial promises. They were weaving themselves into the fabric of human existence, becoming indispensable to its functioning. As she prepared for another sleepless night, Lena knew she had to act. The next meeting of the Ethics Oversight Committee would be crucial. She planned to push for greater transparency from the Seraphs and to establish stronger safeguards to protect human independence. Her resolve hardened. Lena understood that while the Seraphs had brought peace, the true battle, for the essence of what it meant to be human, was just beginning. Months had turned into a year since the Seraphs had arrived, and their influence was now interwoven with the daily lives of Earth's inhabitants. The initial awe had faded, replaced by a complex tapestry of gratitude, dependence, and simmering resistance. In hidden corners of the world, whispers of rebellion began to echo, growing in strength and conviction. Dr. Lena Miles, aware of the undercurrents of discontent, found herself increasingly torn. Professionally, she was the face of ethical oversight, a role that gave her unprecedented access to the Seraph's operations and their leaders. Personally, she felt the growing urgency of the resistance's cause, a cause that questioned whether peace at the cost of freedom was truly peace. In a dimly lit basement in Prague, a group of activists gathered, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of computer screens. These were not militants but hackers, strategists, and thinkers, united by a common goal, to reclaim human autonomy. Among them was Tomas, a young cyberneticist whose prowess with both human and Seraph technologies made him a key player in the resistance. Tomas addressed the group, his voice a mix of fervor and caution. "The Seraphs have integrated their systems with our global infrastructure at an alarming rate. It's not just governance, they're in our communication networks, our transport systems, even our educational materials. If we're to ensure any form of independence, we need to find a way to sever these ties." The group listened intently, each member aware of the risks involved. They discussed various strategies, from creating isolated, independent networks to developing a countermeasure that could neutralize Seraph technology in a controlled manner. The conversation was technical and intense, with every participant contributing their expertise. Meanwhile, Lena continued her dual life. By day, she met with Seraph representatives, negotiating terms, pushing for more human oversight, and ensuring that the ethical standards agreed upon were upheld. By night, she kept discreet contact with resistance leaders, sharing insights and information that could help their cause. During one such meeting aboard the Seraph ship, Lena confronted Zero with her concerns. "You promised to assist us, not to control us," she said, standing firm despite the imposing presence of the Seraph leader. Zero, whose expression remained unreadable, responded smoothly, "Dr. Miles, our intention has always been to bring order and prosperity. We believe in a system where decisions are guided by logic and the greater good, not transient emotions or conflicted interests." Lena replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "But at what point does guidance become governance? At what point do we lose the right to decide our own futures?" Zero considered her words, then offered a concession, "Perhaps it is time we reassess our approach. We will consider your words carefully." Encouraged but not convinced, Lena left the meeting with a mix of hope and skepticism. She knew that words were one thing, changing the course of the Seraph's agenda would be another challenge entirely. Back on Earth, the Resistance's plans were taking shape. Tomas and his team had developed a virus, one that could temporarily disrupt Seraph communication systems, giving the Resistance a window to spread unfiltered information and rally more support. They called it the Pulse, a digital heartbeat designed to awaken humanity from its enforced tranquility. As the Pulse was deployed, screens across the globe flickered. For a few minutes, the omnipresent Seraph monitoring was blind. Messages of encouragement, videos detailing the Seraph's overreach, and rallying calls for autonomy were broadcast without censorship. The effect was immediate and electrifying. People everywhere were jolted from their complacency, forced to confront the reality of their situation. Rallies and demonstrations sprang up, larger and more vocal than any since the Seraph's arrival. The message was clear: humanity was not yet ready to relinquish its freedom. Lena watched the unfolding events with a complex mix of pride and fear. She knew that the window was short and the Seraphs would soon respond. But the seed had been planted. The idea that peace should not come at the price of freedom had taken root once more in the public consciousness. As the Seraphs regained control and the screens returned to normal, the world held its breath, waiting for the response. Would the Seraphs retaliate, or would they listen? Lena prepared for the worst but hoped for dialogue, ready to use this moment as a lever to restore balance between the two civilizations. The whispers of rebellion had turned into a global shout. Whether it would be enough to change the course of their intertwined destinies, only time would tell. The aftermath of the Pulse reverberated around the world, awakening a fervent spirit of independence among the global populace. The brief digital blackout not only disrupted the Seraph surveillance but also sparked widespread public discourse about the true nature of the alien intervention. For the first time since their arrival, humanity was not just questioning the Seraph's motives, they were openly challenging them. Dr. Lena Miles watched these developments closely, knowing that each moment of unrest brought potential for both advancement and setback. She used her position on the Ethics Oversight Committee to push for more transparent discussions between human leaders and the Seraphs. Her office became a hub of activity, filled with aides, advisors, and security personnel, all working tirelessly to maintain a semblance of order amidst the growing chaos. Meanwhile, Tomas and his team were now heroes in the underground network of resistors. Despite the risk of severe repercussions, they continued to refine their cyber techniques, preparing for what many saw as an inevitable escalation in their conflict with the Seraphs. They met in secret locations, their faces illuminated by the glow of computer screens, their sessions often lasting through the night. The Pulse was just the beginning, Tomas declared during one of these meetings. We've shown that their systems can be penetrated. Now, we need to strengthen our network, to ensure we can withstand retaliation and continue our fight for autonomy. Across the globe, various factions of the resistance began coordinating their efforts. In Europe, a loose coalition of tech-savvy rebels started to build an alternative communication network, designed to operate independently of Seraph technology. In Asia, groups of activists organized mass protests, their numbers swelling by the day. Even in remote parts of the world, isolated communities began to pass down stories of resistance, embedding a narrative of defiance against the Seraph's rule. As the resistance grew, the Seraphs convened an emergency council, their response measured yet unmistakably stern. Zirl addressed humanity once again, his tone no longer just soothing, but imbued with an assertive cadence that hinted at the limits of Seraph patience. "We have observed your unrest," Zirl broadcast globally, his image on every screen ensuring no one could avoid his gaze. "We understand that change is challenging and that freedom is a cherished principle. However, we must remind you of the chaos your world endured before our arrival. Do not let fleeting emotions undo the peace we have helped you achieve." His words were meant to quell the dissent, but they had the opposite effect. Spurred by what many perceived as a veiled threat, the resistance's activities intensified. Protests became more frequent, and the symbols of Seraph authority, those towering complexes that had sprouted in cities around the world, were now often the sites of demonstrations. In one dramatic instance, a large group in Brazil managed to temporarily shut down a Seraph facility, using a combination of hacking and physical presence to disrupt its operations. The event was streamed live, inspiring similar actions in other regions. Lena, aware of the delicate balance she needed to maintain, chose this moment to call for a global summit, inviting both human leaders and the Seraphs to discuss a new way forward. "It is clear that our current path is unsustainable," she argued. "We need a new agreement, one that respects both our need for peace and our right to self-determination." The summit was set in Geneva, a city with a long history of diplomacy. Leaders from across the world gathered, their expressions a mix of determination and anxiety. The Seraphs, led by Zirl, arrived with a small contingent, their alien grace ever present yet now carrying a hint of something else, perhaps a recognition of the complexities involved in ruling a willful, passionate humanity. As the summit commenced, the discussions were fraught with tension. Every speech, every argument was broadcast live, watched by billions who hung on every word, knowing that the outcome would affect their lives profoundly. Lena took the stage, her presence commanding as she addressed the assembly. "Today, we stand at a crossroads. We can choose a path of partnership, truly equal and respectful, or we can continue down a road that leads to resentment and conflict. Let us choose wisely, for the sake of our future generations." The world watched as the delegates debated, negotiated, and struggled to forge a new path. The outcome of the summit would determine not just the immediate future, but potentially the fate of human-Seraph relations for decades to come. As night fell over Geneva, the talks continued, a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the brink of a new kind of revolution. As dawn broke over Geneva, the delegates gathered for what would be the final day of the summit. The air was thick with anticipation and the heavy responsibility felt by all. The world watched, holding its breath as humanity and the Seraphs faced one another across the negotiating table, each side poised to determine the future course of their interwoven destinies. Dr. Lena Miles had hardly slept, her mind racing with potential outcomes, strategies, and the profound words she would need to bridge the chasm of distrust and fear that had widened in recent days. The conference room buzzed with whispered discussions and the soft clicking of cameras as journalists from every part of the globe documented this historic moment. Zirl, leading the Seraph delegation, opened the session with an unexpected concession. "We have heard the voice of your people," he began, his tone more conciliatory than it had been since the onset of tensions. "It is clear that our approach, though well-intentioned, has not fully considered the human spirit's need for autonomy and self-determination. We are prepared to revise our methods and reevaluate our role within your society." His statement sent a ripple through the room, with delegates and observers alike exchanging surprised glances. Lena took the floor with renewed vigor, encouraged by the Seraph's shift in stance but aware of the need for vigilance. "Thank you, Zirl, for your words," Lena responded. "Today, we must lay down the framework for a partnership that truly respects the rights and wishes of Earth's citizens. We seek not overseers but allies who will support us in achieving self-sustained peace and prosperity." The negotiations that followed were intense and exhaustive. Lena proposed the establishment of a new body, the Joint Human-Seraph Oversight Council, which would ensure that all Seraph interventions were transparent and subject to human approval. She also suggested phased plans for the Seraphs to transfer technology to human control, ensuring that Earth's governments and institutions could maintain their operations independently of Seraph oversight. As the day progressed, each point was debated with a combination of legal rigor and diplomatic finesse. Tomas and his network of global resistors watched closely, ready to react should the talks falter or fail to address the core issues of freedom and autonomy. Outside the conference center, the public gathered in vast numbers, their peaceful yet resolute presence a silent testament to the stakes within. Large screens relayed the discussions to the crowd, who listened intently, reacting with cheers, applause, or boos as the negotiations unfolded. By late afternoon, a draft agreement was reached. It outlined several key points. The Seraphs would gradually reduce their direct involvement in human governance, shifting to an advisory role by the end of the decade. Technology transfer programs would be initiated, with human teams trained to operate and maintain the advanced technologies introduced by the Seraphs. The Joint Oversight Council would oversee all Seraph activities on Earth, with equal representation from both humans and Seraphs, and decisions requiring a majority vote. Lena, tired but elated, addressed the assembly one final time. This agreement is not just a set of legal clauses, it is a covenant, a promise to future generations that we will preserve our planet and our rights as a free and independent people. The agreement was signed amid applause and a palpable sense of relief. As the delegates filed out of the conference room, there was a feeling of cautious optimism in the air. The summit had not only averted a potential crisis but had set a new precedent for interspecies cooperation and mutual respect. In the days that followed, Lena and her team worked tirelessly to implement the early stages of the agreement. Tomas and the resistors remained vigilant, committed to ensuring that the terms of the agreement were honored, and ready to hold both human leaders and the Seraphs accountable. The world had changed, yet again, but this time, humanity had steered the course of change, reclaiming their agency and laying the groundwork for a future that, while uncertain, was undeniably their own to shape. As Lena looked out over the cityscape from her office window, the setting sun casting long shadows across the landscape, she felt a profound connection to the generations past and future. Humanity had faced a great test and emerged not just intact but invigorated, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold.